Been walking around in chains unseen, heard lies from pulpits and TV screens. But something ancient in my soul started whispering truth I used to know. They told me I was cursed from birth, but the scrolls say I'll inherit the earth. Dust off the laws, yeah, I read them again. Repentance turned slaves into holy men. And now I see the veil's been lifted, hearts of stone getting shifted. No more idols, no more frauds. We walk in righteous with our God. The truth is undefeated, can't kill what's been completed. We're the light that can't be hidden. We were lost, but now we're risen. We the meek, yeah, we the seed of Jacob, chosen and free. They lied, but now we see it. The truth is undefeated. Dry bones are dancing in the field, prophecies that time won't kill. From the four winds we return, with every law we learn we burn. No longer chasing every breeze, our soul at peace, our minds at ease. We keep the Sabbath, hold the line, set apart in spirit and time. We turned away, but he never forgot. Even in wrath he loved us alive. Now mercy reigns and judgment flows to every nation that touched his own. Return, O Israel, the kingdom awaits you. They tried to hide the truth in plain sight, but the truth don't need a spotlight. It shines from Judah to the ends of the earth. The truth is undefeated, can't erase what's been repeated. It was written, now we heed it. We are the ones, believe it. We the meek, yeah, we the seed of Zion, rising indeed. They fought but couldn't beat it. The truth is undefeated.
Shout out to the family, much love, honor, and respect. I wanted to come on and go over a little known technology that is going to change the world. Is actually responsible for the powers that be feeling as though they are losing their grip, and they are absolutely correct. It is time for the bullish spirit, for the controlling, want to control the world and want to control everybody, and putting everyone against each other and dropping bombs and terrorizing nations. And I mean, it's just coming to an end because the truth is undefeated. All right. So what I want to do, I won't take up much more time. I have a video for you of Don Tap Scott. He's talking about the blockchain. The blockchain is a immutable, transparent, global ledger network of computers. All financial institutions work on what's known as a ledger. So all the transactions are entered on this global immutable ledger. And it is the safest technology on the planet to exchange money. All assets are coming to the blockchain. We've been saying that since December 20th, December 1st, 2020. And it's just coming full circle today. We've been talking about the blockchain. We've been talking about digital assets, cryptocurrency. And please keep in mind that the power is not in the cryptocurrency. The power is in the trust protocol of the blockchain. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tether, they're nothing but the Trojan horses for the blockchain. The dollar did not know what was coming. America right now is debating on if they're going to raise the debt ceiling, or as Trump and Elizabeth Warren said, are you going to eliminate the debt ceiling altogether? So you have to pay attention to what's going on. Then we just get a overnight preemptive strike from Israel to Iran's nuclear facilities, and Iran responding and retaliating with over 100 drones. That was released in Tel Aviv, okay? So understand that we are in the climate of judgment. And we know that World War III could very well be here. Many don't understand that Iran is heavily allied and backed by Russia, as well as China, okay? And so with the U.S. forces supporting Israel in their 18-month siege and genocide of the Palestinians, men, women, and children, you have to understand what's happening, what's taking place on a global scale. Judgment is on the land. But many don't even understand what's going on. Most people are in la la land. They're in their opinion, they're in their feelings, they're in their emotions. They're not paying attention to what's going on, right? So what I wanted to do was I wanted to share a mentor of mine. His name is Don Tapscott. He's a Canadian businessman, and he's the first to introduce me to blockchain technology. Since December 1st, 2020, I have been a student of blockchain technology. I have been a student of digital assets. I have been hodling digital assets ever since December the 1st, 2020. I have seen Bitcoin ups and downs. When I first was made aware of Bitcoin, Bitcoin was like selling for, I think, $100 a coin or something in there. We could, my wife and I, we could have purchased, I think it was, it was some ridiculous numbers at the time. And a friend of ours had come to us and just told us about this new technology that was coming out. And we, like many other people, we were too focused on what we're doing and all these other things. And we could have took $100 and now been done, really, to be honest, So understand that the world is rapidly changing. The financial industry is rapidly changing. We have a huge change from the centralized banking system to a decentralized peer-to-peer value exchange, returning the control of assets back to the people of the world. That is what the world fears the most. The world has run off of elites, elite families, a few families controlling everyone's lives. Okay. And now that is jeopardized because we have AI, we have blockchain technology, we have Web3, we have the metaverse. You have to understand the internet, the third iteration of the internet, or the third generation of the internet, is Web3. Now, Web 1, you could just read the information that was on the screen, right? And the information provider still controlled that information. They control that asset. They control that data, right? In Web 2, now they still hold control over their data and the data that they put on your social media platforms and so on and so forth, but they also own your data that you put on. Well, Web 3 allows you to be able to own your own intellectual property. We currently have about 5 or 6 new songs. One you heard at the beginning is The Truth is Undefeated, as well as Keep Going. That will be converted into NFTs, and you'll be able to purchase those NFTs and own a piece of those songs and license a piece of those songs, right? Your ownership, you'll be able to buy and trade that NFT. Is called a non-fungible token. This is done through smart contracts, and those smart contracts are just self-executing contracts that will be explained in just a second by Don Tapscott. But you have to understand what's happening right now, ladies and gentlemen. The world is changing. Pay attention to what's going on. You have bombs dropping that could very well be the beginning and the onset of World War III, the final battle. So take your time. I have a new book coming out, Sold to Do Mischief, Forsaking the Holy Covenant. We're going to dive deep into the identity of the Israelites, right? We understand that blacks in the 4 corners of the earth and in the Americas descend from the 4th son of Jacob of the 12 tribes of Israel. His name was Judah. Okay. So when you see hashtag blacks are the real Jews, you know where it's coming from. Shout out to the family, man. Much love, honor, and respect. Pay attention, Mr. Don Tapscott.
Writing out like a big cloud or whatever. The murmuration has a great interdependence as well. You know, if I'm talking to an executive CEO audience, I'll say, look, I think business can't succeed in a world that's failing, and you people need to step up to that fact. And if I was talking to Donald Trump, which will never occur, I would say that to him as well.
If you want to learn, play, and earn Bitcoin by just having fun without spending a single pence dime wherever you're on the planet, download the Swissport Community app. You have the links here below. You have the QR code as well. And on top of downloading the Swissport Community app, don't forget to check out Don Tapscott's blockchain course on Coursera. It's an amazing course if you want to learn further from this mastermind, this genius. The link is also here below. Thank you so much, guys, and check out the app and the course. Dear crypto community and blockchain buddies across the globe, welcome back to season 2 of Kryptonites, the No BS blockchain channel built with the community and for the community. And today we have an amazing, mind-blowing guest, someone who has inspired millions of people across the globe and one of the most visited TED Talks in the history of blockchain, co-author, co-founder, and executive chairman of Blockchain Research Institute, the one and only Don Tapscott. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Well, it's good to be here, Alex.
Wow, this is overwhelming. I'm so happy to have you. You've inspired so many people. I was on the phone the other day with a good friend of mine, and he said, Don Tapscott, do you know that he's the reason why I left the traditional world of finance? So thank you so much for
I don't get tired of hearing that. I hear a lot too.
I'm sure you've moved many people. And speaking of your TED Talk, which was an amazing success, and what I love about you, Don, is the fact that you can take complicated things and explain them in a very simple way for everyone to understand. And for me, that's a definition of intellect. But if I can start off by quoting one of the things you said in your TED Talk for the viewers out there, you mentioned that the technology most likely to have the biggest impact on society in the next decades would be the blockchain. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, sir, elaborating a little bit on what you
Sure.
said here.
Well, I've been at this for 40 years now. I began in Bell Labs in Canada in the 70s. And we were doing studies on multifunction workstations connected to a vast network of networks. And I wrote a couple of books about that in the 1980s that nobody read. I think my mother bought many of the copies. But and then I wrote a couple of bestsellers, Paradigm Shift in '92 and The Digital Economy in '94. And I had to reflect on 25 years later what had occurred, because I was asked to write the 20th anniversary edition of The Digital Economy. So I started thinking about the changes that had happened. And we'd gone through mainframes, mini computers, PCs, the internet, the web, social media, the cloud, the mobile web, big data, and so on. And I came to the conclusion that we were entering a second era of the digital age, where technology is infusing itself into everything, the physical world, our bodies, where you have technologies that do things that they weren't programmed to do, machine learning, and all these other technologies, autonomous vehicles and the Internet of Things and drones and robots and so on. And the more I started thinking about it, and I started talking to my son Alex, the more we concluded that the foundational technology for all of this was, in fact, the underlying technology of crypto, blockchain. And that in many ways this would be more important, or at least different, in the sense that it's orthogonal to all these other technologies. It's the new operating platform for the 21st century enterprise. And at the heart of that was this notion that the internet is entering a second era. And for 40 years we've had an internet of information. Now we're getting an internet of value, where anything of value, from money, securities, intellectual property, any asset, something of value that belongs to somebody, the data in our identities, music, art, votes. A vote's an asset, where these things can be managed, stored, transacted in a secure and private way, and where trust is not achieved by a middleman, it's achieved by cryptography and collaboration and some clever code. So that's sort of the way that we think about this. It's not some interesting new technology. It's much more profound.
That's an amazing answer. And speaking of which, you just mentioned data and control of data. And I know that's something that you really care about, and you mentioned it as well in your TED Talk. As you know, millennials and new generations are a little bit more sensitive about data, maybe perhaps compared to me, where I'm like, it's okay, you can have my data if it helps me. But could you elaborate a little bit more, Don, on data ownership, responsibility, and how blockchain can transform this specific?
Well, the way that I've been describing it, it may be a little hyperbolic, is that we have entered over the years this new era of digital feudalism. And under the feudal system that surrounded the world prior to capitalism, you didn't get paid a wage. You were tied to some land, and you worked the land, you developed produce, and then the landlord took most of it away, but you got to keep some. And today the new asset class is not vegetables, it's data. And we all create this data, and the virtual Alex knows more about you than you do, you know, because you can't remember what you bought a year ago, said a year ago, what your exact location a year ago, or what medication you had, or what diagnosis you had, or what score you got on a test, or whatever. And the trouble is that this virtual you that represents your identity is not owned by you, it's owned by these digital landlords. You create the data that constitutes your identity, but they expropriate it, and you're left with a few cabbages. And this is a big problem in ways more than people think. Like, first of all, it means that you can't monetize the data. This is the new oil. You create it, but you get no value from it. Secondly, it means that you're going to be hacked, because they keep all this data on central computers. Thirdly, you can't use the data to plan your life. Imagine how all that data would be helpful in planning your job, or your travel, or your health, or your education, or consuming whatever. And the big one is that your privacy is being undermined. And, you know, people say to me, well, Don, privacy's dead, get over it. And I don't agree with that view, because to me, privacy is the foundation of freedom. And all this data represents our identity. We need to get it back so that we can manage it responsibly for ourselves. So the way to do that is to have a self-sovereign identity in a blockchain. This thing moves around with you. It's part of your wallet. And it's in a black box, and it's sweeping up all this transactional data, this health data, locational data, everything. And it won't be too far when it's capturing real time your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your epidemiological, or your reactions to all kinds of things, your emotions, whatever. And it's private for you. And you can use this data to better your own life. So this, to me, is one of the most powerful ideas in the whole blockchain kind of crypto world of a self-sovereign identity. We're at the Blockchain Research Institute, we're spending a ton of time on this topic.
It's a very fascinating topic. And speaking of all the amazing research that you guys produce at Blockchain Research Institute, is privacy one of the most common requests that you're getting? Because obviously some exchanges, some countries, they ban privacy coins or other blockchains that allow private transactions. Do you see a strong use case for this privacy?
Well, there's a role for things being private. Doesn't mean you're a criminal. People say, well, if you got nothing to hide. You know what? I have plenty of things that I don't want to divulge to the world. And for sure, I don't want to divulge to governments who might, you know, we think the governments are always benevolent. Well, that's just not true. You know, in some countries, the government is your biggest danger. And you have a democratic government one moment, and you never know what you have the next moment. And also, what does it mean for corporations to have perfect information about you? They already manipulate us to do all kinds of things. And sometimes, you know, we just want to do things that are private. Maybe a woman in Saudi Arabia wants to subscribe to a magazine that she really shouldn't be reading as a woman, because it talks about professional development or something like that. So now I've been at this a while, and it's exciting to see an idea whose time has come. You may not know, but I wrote the book, I co-authored the book in 1996 called Who Knows? Safeguarding Your Privacy in a Networked Age. Now that was another one where mom came through for me big time. But because people would look at me and they like, safeguarding? I don't get it. Like, what's the big deal? Well, now people are starting to get it. And they're not getting it because of some big conceptual thing that I'm saying. Hey, you're surfing, S-E-R-F-I-N-G. The internet is a feudal, you know, surf. They're getting it because they start to see that this data not belonging to them becomes seriously problematic in all kinds of very concrete ways. And if you're living in a country with a social credit score or something like that, that's a really big problem. You don't pay a parking ticket, and for some weird reason your kid didn't get into a good school. Or worse, you do something like go on a demonstration and all of a sudden you've lost your passport. So this is a basic right. We need to fight hard to defend it. And I'm optimistic that we're finally seeing a turn in attitudes about this.
That's fantastic. So eloquently put and so easy to understand. Don, there's one thing I remember in Geneva. So you were there earlier this year, I believe in January. And I remember seeing you on the stage, and I won't spoil it, but you had images of birds flying together. And a lot of people kind of question decentralized leadership and decentralization as a movement, because they say that you always need like one point of authority to make the decisions in case there's chaos. You always need one leader. The jungle works like that. And I would love to hear more about what you communicated in Geneva, because that was such a powerful message that you had.
The idea is, it's called the murmuration. And it's what happens with starlings. Like fish come in schools, bees come in swarms. Starlings in the moors not far from here, near Oxford, Broadmoor, and so on, they come in something called a murmuration. It refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. You have tens of thousands of starlings that are out throughout the day doing their starling thing, foraging for food and so on. And at night they come together and they create one of the most spectacular things in all of nature. Just Google it. If you want to Google one narrated by me, like from 15 years ago, go macroeconomics murmuration. And that was kind of pre-blockchain when I was exploring this idea about distributed power and leadership. And anyway, the point is that the murmuration has a function. A number actually, but a big one is it warms the birds up for the cold night ahead, but the big one is that it protects the birds from predators. So you can see this thing sort of swirling up like a giant tornado, and then a lightning rod. It goes into the sky and then it comes swooping down. It's chasing after a hawk 25 times the size of a starling, and all these little tiny birds are terrifying this hawk, and it's just taking off afraid of the power of the little birds. And it's not just a fanciful analogy, because the metaphor is a good one, that the principles that we describe in Blockchain Revolution behind blockchain, which by the way was one of my favorite sections of the book. It was, if we could get inside Satoshi's mind and understand the underlying principles that he, she, whatever had in solving this double spend problem, in creating Bitcoin, what would those principles be? Now, they've never been articulated by Satoshi, but we came up with these 7 principles, and they're reflected in many ways in this murmuration. There's the idea of I said that trust is not achieved through a middleman, it's achieved through collaboration. And through cryptography. This thing has a great kind of integrity, which is the foundation of trust. Because trust, what is trust? I asked myself that question when I wrote a previous book, like 20 years ago now. And it took me about 3 months to answer it. I read everything I could on trust, and I think I can say it in a sentence, that trust is the expectation that the other party will act with integrity, that they will do the right thing, that they'll be honest, that they'll be considerate of your interests, and that they'll abide by their commitment. Which is the amazing thing about what Satoshi did, is he created this trust protocol where I can trust you 100%, because you can't be dishonest with me in a transaction. You can't not abide by your commitments, and in the case of the murmuration, a little bird will go after a killer 25 times its size, because he knows that the other birds will have its back, that they will do the right thing. So we're studying nature to learn more about distributed forms of organization. And in something like that, there is leadership, but there's no one leader, and it kind of changes. And that's what we're going to need going forward. We're going to need this kind of structure and metabolism if we're going to solve many of the problems facing humanity today.
It's incredible because, like you said, they come so close to each other and really close to hitting each other, but they never hit. And I found that to be a beautiful example of how distributed leadership is actually implemented. And that was absolutely fascinating. I have a follow-up question based on what you were saying. You were talking about the Blockchain Revolution, which is an amazing book. I have the digital version here. And in the book, you talk about how it's not just about finance. It's not just about working to find investment solutions, and you don't really explore that world that much and talk about other use cases that you see where we can benefit through a token economy. Do you mind elaborating on which type of tokens or which fields do you think we really need blockchain to help us?
Wow. Do we have a few hours? Well, let me just say one thing about the financial industry. Like, it all kind of started there because it's sort of about money and it's about value, and that's the industry that is the first up to be an intermediary to deal with all this stuff in society. And there are huge changes underway in that industry, and we spent a lot of time studying them. But they were only one chapter of the book. Now, Alex Tapscott, I don't know if I'm giving away secrets here, but he has a new book coming out in a couple of months about the reinvention of the financial services industry.
Can't wait.
And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work that is very profound. And this is his world, you know, so he decided, I'm going to focus in deep on this and try and bring some clarity. But you mentioned like crypto and crypto assets. So let's talk about that for a sec, because right now there's a lot of confusion about this. And why in the new edition of Blockchain Revolution, we wrote a long foreword. It's like 25,000 words. It's like a third of a book. And this was one of the issues that we wanted to clarify, that we're in the early stages of the digitization of assets, unlike has never happened before. And it started with currencies and where the token represents some money or a currency. And that's great, you know, we've got Bitcoin, all kinds of other currencies. And the amazing thing about Bitcoin, as Alex says, is that it works. Yeah. And it's secure. Now, I don't know if you saw, but John Oliver on late night TV had some fun with analogy.
With a chicken?
Yeah. I said, look, you're going to have trouble hacking Bitcoin because it's a highly processed thing. You know, it's sort of like turning a chicken McNugget back into a chicken. And I thought that was kind of, I said, someone will be able to do that someday, but for the next while, it's going to be tough. So he got a hold of that analogy, and he had a lot of fun with it. He says, man, that chicken would be bleeped up, you know, if it came back. The things I saw, baka, baka. My body is whole, but what of my soul? But anyway, but currencies are just one kind of token. So we've got tokens that are platform tokens, like what exists on Ethereum. Ether is not really a currency, it's more a token that enables smart contracts to work and to be constructible. But then you have securities tokens that represent securities, and all stocks and bonds and swaps and everything else will become tokens. You know, so we had an ICO, I don't like that term so much, but a token generation event that last year they raised over $1 billion. There was no stock market, no stock, and no investment bank. So and the really smart leaders of exchanges right now know that, of traditional exchanges, know that their role is going to change quite dramatically. But then you got other stuff. You got natural asset tokens. Like I'm involved in this thing called carbonx.ca, where we're tokenizing carbon credits. And this is a big problem. Carbon, climate change. If you believe every scientist in the world except the 3 that were hired by traditional industries to lie, we need to mobilize planet Earth. We've been mobilized before around world wars, but we're on different sides. How are we going to get every company, every consumer, every kid in every schoolyard, every family, every product manufacturer to reindustrialize the planet? Well, I don't think it's going to happen because people like me or Al Gore, bless his heart, are giving more speeches. It's going to happen through economic incentives. So if you have a token that represents a carbon credit, you'll buy that carbon neutral espresso machine because you get the CarbonX tokens with it. And they're tokens. They have value. You can trade them. You can do stuff with them. They're fungible. You turn it into a fiat currency if you want. And that's just one of the things we're doing. We're also creating what we call zero footprints, and we own that brand. Zero footprint ETFs and funds, where you can invest in a fund that's a high-performing fund, but it's all the carbon has been offset. So anyway, I could go on. There are tokens that represent collectibles, you know, like a kitty. The people who have either too much time on their hand or too great a love for cats. Anyway, but then you have tokens that represent like a fiat currency or a stable coin. So that this is really important to understand that there are these different types of tokens, and especially if you're an investor, obviously, but also if you're a regulator, because, you know, not everything is a security. Yeah. And right now, regulators all around the world say, whoa, that thing is walking, it must be a duck. I didn't hear it quack, but it must be a duck. And that's a huge impediment all around the world. These regulators are inhibiting innovation.
So would it be safe to say that, you know, some people believe that Bitcoin is a winner takes all? As you know, these days, a lot of Bitcoin maximalists are growing and believe that it's the death of altcoins, the death of utility tokens. Would it be safe to say that you disagree and you see different type of utilities that we can use?
I think Bitcoin's amazing. And when it comes to a non-fiat currency, it's a very powerful thing. And there are all kinds of use cases for it beyond just investment. You know, if you're in some country that has restrictions over capital flow, if you need a relatively stable store of value, you're in, I don't know, Argentina right now, where the inflation is like a certain percent per day, then there are real use cases. But to me, the biggest use cases for blockchain are not money.